congregation is invited to share their faith path that brought them on their spiritual journey to this place at this time. And it's a way for us to get to know each other better in a more intimate environment and come together through stories. So it's an occasional program. It was going to be monthly. We haven't managed to pull that together. This is the product of the Adult Faith Development Team, if you're familiar with that. Isabel Call and I are on that team and got this program going a little while ago.
Thank you.
Thank you. It has proven to be a meaningful thing for a lot of people in the church, I think. We'll try to speak loudly so everybody can hear. Please wave or let us know if you need anything, if you can't hear, or you need anything. And I think that's enough of that. And Isabel Call is going to introduce today's speaker. Yeah.
Great. About the timing, though, we'll probably go until 12:45. Ian Hill is someone I've known since they started as a student at Star King, where I'm also a student. And we've taken 3 classes together, I think. And it's... All right, I'll look at you. So we've taken 3 classes together at Star King, and every time I've been in a class with Ian, I've learned so much from their presence. And Ian is also a worship associate here at the church, so some of you have probably seen them on the chancel, and it's been so wonderful hearing about your story in that space. And it's just a blessing to have you in the church and to have you here to share with us. So please use the time as you'd like.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So to start, I would first just like to extend my gratitude to God, extend gratitude to Earth, extend gratitude to ancestors, and extend gratitude to First Nations people whose land has become our home. I'm just so grateful for all of you, for everything that has led to this moment, for Carol and for Isabel for inviting me to speak. I'm very, very honored to share my story. So thank you all. I would like to give the story for how I came here by starting with my call to ministry, because my participation in the UU congregation is directly attached to that. So I'm going to start by reading about a page and a half of my call to ministry, and then close with how it relates to being here right now. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. By Reinhold Niebuhr, if I'm saying that right. These are the words tattooed on my right thigh, layered over scars of past physical harm. The serenity prayer serves as my reminder to breathe and let God. Let God grant me peace. Let God grant me acceptance. Let God grant me courage. Let God grant me wisdom. The gifts of peace, acceptance, courage, and wisdom were what I prayed for even in the times when I didn't believe in the God that I was praying to. The Holy Spirit responded to my prayers by calling me to be one of their messengers while blessing me with my requested gifts as tools for ministry. Before answering the call to serve God and spiritual community, I was serving in a different capacity. I was in the military, stationed at Travis Air Force Base in sunny Northern California for almost 11 years. So I've been living in the Bay Area in Oakland for now it's maybe been 15 years. Sadly, the weather nor the many beauties of the Bay did a thing to brighten the darkness of depression I was suffering in. As a Black, gay, gender non-binary, Christ-loving, non-Christian military service member, I felt many elements of my identity were in conflict with each other. According to the Bible I'd grown up reading, my way of life was sinful. Yet to deny the truth of my being also felt sinful. I was so tormented with confusion that I fell into a cycle of self-hate and intense sadness. When I turned 29, I had enough of self-loathing, and I decided I needed to physically move somewhere different in order to move beyond the mental negativity that I'd been inhabiting. My particular job in the military didn't offer many places to relocate. South Korea was one of only two others at the time. I begged for a new assignment and was fortunate to get orders to Osan Air Base at an Air Force installation 1 hour away from the city of Seoul, Korea. I just want to say that to be giving this talk today as we honor the Lunar New Year and really celebrate like Asian culture, it feels like, wow. I just had to acknowledge that because I'm like, man, just yes, wow. Um, so Korea was a really beautiful country for me to live in, and I experienced deeply loving and generous people. The land seemed to emit a remarkably tranquil energy, and it was shocking to notice such a strong sense of peace considering the looming threat of destruction posed by the leaders of North Korea. My job at Osan was to be a strategic war planner. It's very different than my role now, and adds to the experience of inner conflict that I was feeling during that time. I didn't understand how South Koreans seemed to be so peaceful when war was constantly being planned for their country. I wanted to learn from them. I wanted to understand how I could have peace when a war was being waged inside of me. And specifically back in the States, how it would feel with war being waged against me outside of me as well. I gained a glimpse of understanding Korea's peaceful way of life through a dear friend of mine, Sandra. Sandra is Korean American, a practicing Buddhist, and was also in the military. To this day, I don't know what sparked our friendship or what led me to join her in prayer at her Buddhist center. I do know, however, that our meeting was divinely inspired. I believe God used that moment to show me a way to access peace. At Sandra's temples, the words of a Nichiren Buddhist prayer were broken into digestible pieces and shared with me like the body of Christ during communion. I consumed all of it and allowed it to feed my spiritually malnourished soul. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, the mantra of Nichiren Buddhism, is a sacred chant that translates to faith in the mystic law of the universe. As soon as the mantra first touched my lips, I experienced mental liberation from thoughts of needing salvation. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a sinner needing to be saved. In that moment, I knew I was exactly as I was meant to be. With this realization, a deep sense of calmness and inner peace washed over me. Inside of this peace was another gift: acceptance. I discovered that the internal conflict and depression I'd been battling was because I had not made peace with myself. I hadn't accepted the fullness of who I was. Being Black, gay, gender non binary, Christ loving, and non Christian while serving in the military had been a challenge. It was a challenge that led me to compartmentalize, separate, and even hate parts of myself that didn't seem to fit in with the world around me. Through my Buddhist practice, I found alignment with myself and was blessed with a new integrated perspective. I saw that I wasn't made to fit in with the world around me. I was born to stand out. I was born to stand out and be different. I was meant to unapologetically love myself with all of my complex identities. And To not do so was to cut myself off from God. The Holy Spirit guided me to fully accept myself as I am and reclaim my gift of inner peace. I was given messages that all of God's children are uniquely created and meant to fully embrace our varied expressions of individuality. I learned that it is only when we radically love our whole selves that God is able to extend the fullness of complete and perfect love to each of us. With so many people suffering in the world as victims of self-hate and social delusion, God is calling for witnesses to be examples of courageous love for self and all beings. The divine spirit of life is awakening ministers to share the wisdom gleaned from experiences of God. For far too long, people have been led to believe that only a certain kind of person is worthy of the many gifts of love the Creator has to offer. The truth is, we all have been universally blessed with access to unlimited gifts of love. I feel I have been called to share this truth and be an example of the diversity of God's love. That is my call to ministry. And as I said earlier, I came to Unitarian Universalism for a very specific reason. I needed a spiritual home that would safely house the fullness of my identity. I identify as Black, queer, multi-religious, spiritual leader, and I wanted a church home that would hold and honor and lift up all the parts of me that have historically been marginalized and oppressed. I wanted a church that not only knows that my Black body matters, but also that my gender non-binary body matters, that my union with my wife matters, my relationship with my ancestors, the earth, Buddha, Jesus, God, and all of that matters and is appreciated so deeply that the wisdom of my intersectional experiences are given a platform like this one to be shared publicly. I kind of have a picture in my mind that tells a story of why I chose UU as my spiritual home. The picture is the image that symbolizes different parts of my religious identity. And one of the first beings in the picture is that of a father. As a person that grew up, was raised by a mother, a single mother in the Black Baptist church, I was taught to believe that Christ is the head of our house. Even though now my idea of what that means in my own home has shifted, there's still a sense of God being the Father in my mind. And that changes at different moments. But in this image of my religious kind of identity and formation and family, God represents Father. Earth, I've taken to be my mother. Um, Buddhism has become like my lover. I've shared this a lot with my wife. Like when I first became Buddhist, I felt like when I would sit and spend time reading the sutras that I was falling in love. Um, yeah, that just really meant a lot to me. And so, Father, being my Christian roots, Earth, and earth-based practices being my mother, Buddhism being my lover. And more recently, I've developed a very strong relationship with my ancestors, which also includes parts of African spiritual practices. And I pictured them as my grandparents. Um, and so I come with this kind of multi religiosity in my being. And I felt I needed a home that would accept the fullness of my being, and I feel that UU is the best place for that. Yes. Um, I came to this church specifically because it was recommended by a lot of my peers at Star King. I hadn't known about Unitarian Universalism growing up, and I have a lot of friends who had never heard of it. And when I found Star King, actually, after getting my call to ministry, I wondered how would I learn how to share these gifts. And I don't remember what words I searched for, but whatever it was, Star King popped up, and it was with a picture of beloved Ibrahim Baba, um, like this. I think he might be like 6'5" or something taller, beautiful black man, a queer being with the orange beard, a lot of piercings, who was just like really representing this like radical spiritual leadership. And I saw this image and felt that if this school like lifts up a person like him, where this would be the first image I see when I'm searching the words that I search, that is the school that I need to go to help influence my radical way of being a spiritual leader. So I ended up being at Star King, which then led me here. Well, led me first to see Pastor Jacqueline. And me and Pastor Jacqueline have a lot of things in common, um, as many of you may have noticed. Yes, our baldness. And she was also in the Air Force and queer and black. And I again felt, if this is a church that has a person as she is, as the minister, that is the church where I want to be. Um, and that is what got me to come to the church. What got me to actually take the leap and join the church was my many interactions with most of the people in the room. I will be transparent and admit that I was really nervous because although, yeah, come if you want to come in, maybe. No? um, Sometimes, even like in this moment, being invited to spaces where you're not really sure if you're welcome feels really hard. And although Pastor Jacqueline was immensely welcoming and encouraging me, I wasn't sure if I trusted the members of the congregation to also welcome me in that way. Um, Particularly because before I came to this church, I went to another Unitarian Universalist church, and the greeting that I received was what I experienced as um, a microaggression. Um, and how that looked was, before I even made it inside of the church, someone came outside and was like, "Oh, hi, you must be the singer." No, no. "Oh, you're the guest preacher." No, I'm just a person wanting to visit church. And I totally get that the person was just really excited to see, a new face. But it really hurt that like immediately I had to be who they thought I was. I couldn't just be showing up like as myself. Um, and that was really frustrating. And there was a moment after that in this church where, after I had been coming for some time, someone who had not seen me coming for some time um, said to me, oh, you must be new here because I would recognize if someone who looks like you has been coming to our church. And I was shocked because I thought, what do you mean by that? I mean, the minister looks exactly like me. So like, what do you mean? Um, but I couldn't really respond because I was just so hurt. And I was really tempted to not come back to the church. And then I started reading the website and I saw what the congregation's covenant was and the commitment to being a multiracial, multi religious, multi generational, all of these multi like parts that the church is committed to working towards. And I felt that if I want to be a part of living out those values, that I too have to show up and be honest and speak my truth and have a beloved conversation and go from there. And since then, I feel like I've had nothing but wonderful, loving conversations with everyone here. And when Isabel so graciously walked with me to sign the book, I knew that this would be a place that would walk with me on my journey of spiritual formation. And so that is why I'm here.
And we're glad.
Thank you.
So are you comfortable taking questions?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes.
Well, this question comes from who I am,
Mm.
but I want to know what towns you grew up in.
Mm. I grew up in Miami, Florida. Uh, are you from Miami? Wow. Yeah, I grew up mostly in Miami, Florida. Also in Havana, Florida, near Tallahassee. I have a lot of family there. Um, and I think I was born in Germany and I was there for a couple of years when I was younger and don't have a lot of memories of it, but a lot of pictures that show that, yep, I was there. Um, but I have more memories of Miami and Havana. Yeah. Thank you for asking. Yes.
Um, I'm quite curious. You said earlier that you still call God the Father,
Hmm.
and it sounds like to me that that you grew up in a Baptist background. You've not only made peace with your former religion, but you've also incorporated that into your multi-religious system of beliefs. How did you come across to that? Because I'm a recovering Catholic, and my previous religious background, especially as a youth leader at some of my old parishes, has made me afraid of Christians. And
Mm.
that's what sprung me to Unitarian Universalism, because it's a safe harbor for me to get away from Christians.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that within our community, we do have UU Christians here. UU Christians who will not actually know Christ because of who I am as an active being there. But I'm really curious to hear from you, like, how did you make that peace with your own heart of Christianity
Mm.
and over that in your own system of values as a view?
Mm. Thank you for asking that. I'll be honest and say that it is a work in progress. Um, the way that it showed up as a thing to be integrated was actually through my ancestors in song. I had completely disconnected from Christianity altogether, singing and anything related to it I was not about. And I shared with a couple of people. Actually, I shared it in a reflection when talking about ancestors previously, that when I came to this church um, and started stepping into like the fullness of myself, that part of me just showed up, and it showed up in a gospel song. Oh, actually, a old Baptist hymnal that I didn't even know that I still knew the words to, until there was a symposium for UU, Our Songs Know Who We Are. And when that song like rose in my spirit and I had no like choice but to sing it, I knew that that part of me was begging to like come out. And so the way that it's being reconciled, and the reason why God is He, is more related to all of the songs that like name Jesus and Christ and God as He, and I like can sing them without um, hesitation or feeling uncomfortable about it. So I noticed just in connecting to a practice that felt safe, I'll call it, that I was comfortable with saying He. In other places where I feel more like, I don't know, Christ might be used as a way to oppress, like my queer identity, in those spaces, um, the name of God or the gender of God comes out as she, just because I don't know if that's just my wanting to be resistant or what, but then it's she. Because I feel that God can hold that fluidity, that in the spaces where it's like, okay, just say whatever feels natural in the song, and then in the times where it's like um, a strong other presence is like dominating, then I'm called to bring that counter. And that's how what God means for me. So the gender has just become less important in my personal practice. So it's mostly in song, and in some scripture, not all. I have not reconciled my relationship with the whole Bible, but certain scriptures feel like they serve me now. So I kind of just take the good and what feels like nutritious to me, and like leave the fat. I hope that answers. Okay.
Yeah, I was listening to you talk a little earlier, and you were talking about your experience meditating. I think like this morning. I was wondering if you could talk about how meditation has worked into your spiritual practice and sort of that journey that it has taken.
Hmm. Um, Meditation for me started with chanting. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo was how I got into meditation, and it was uh, that practice because it was like maybe it started for maybe 15 minutes of chanting where I was able to focus on a single like phrase, and that um, what it represents. And I think because it was in another language that was unfamiliar to me, that the act of saying it felt like enough of a task that I could just focus on doing that and thinking about what it means. And eventually, I got to a point where I was chanting for hours, and what distilled from that was this. It felt like kind of walking a path like between trees, like over and over and over, and kind of leading a pathway. So now um, I don't need to spend a whole lot of time, and I don't need to say the words. It's like the path has already been made, so I can more easily just drop into that space. And that is what remains in my practice now. That some mornings, like this morning, I had a very rich chanting moment after giving thanks to my ancestors, and that's what came up. Um, Other times it might be singing a gospel song and then like sitting in the stillness of that like vibration of from singing like really loudly, or after listening to drumming and then just sitting and letting that energy kind of just wash over me. So meditation has morphed into a lot of things for me in my daily practice. Does that answer? Okay. Okay. Yes.
I so loved you revealing to me that before you come to church in the morning, you've already spent a couple hours in this practice. And I find myself touching back into that concept for myself in my own life.
Yeah.
Say, no, you need to find yourself first.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think at all that it's about the time that you spend, it's just doing it. Um, I I did find that when I started this practice, it was I had to be to work at 7 a.m. and it was while I was in Korea, and I was not at all a morning person. Was not at all a morning person, and suddenly my relationship with Buddhism, like that's why I say that it was like a love affair because it was like it got me up at 4 in the morning because it was like I just want to spend time like reading these texts, and so it like made me into a morning person. So I started waking up at 4 a.m. Because I wanted to spend time like reading and chanting and doing this for hours and hours. But that like was what showed me how I want to really be spending my time in my. Because then I don't want to go to work. I want to do this all day. It was really I want to do this all day, and then it was like how can I do this all day? Oh, ministers can do this all day. I'm supposed to be a minister. Like really, that's how it happened. That's really. Um, so
I guess you've learned that ministry involves something else.
yes, for me, yeah, yes, that is the other part. Um, the thing about the morning time though and with spiritual practice, like I believe that whatever it is that when you first wake up and that you feel like you really just want to do before anything else, before you give yourself to anything else, I really want to give it to this thing. I believe that that is what spiritual practice is, and I think it looks different for a lot of people, that it's not necessarily like that you need to pray or meditate or anything like that. It could be reading, it could be looking at your kids, it could be cooking. I mean, I'm just saying it could be a lot of things. So I don't feel like there's any particular way or any amount of time that has to be spent doing it. I think it's just giving a little space to the thing that like you find the most love and joy kind of thing.
What have you learned from ancestors and how have you incorporated that into your practice? Like, I feel like we kind of miss the whole boat around
Hmm.
ancestors, and I feel that that's a really rich place to go and draw from, but I don't personally, but I think it's, so how did you incorporate
Hmm.
it, or how did you learn from it, or?
Um, Gosh, I'm trying to think. So from the song thing that I shared, with our songs know who we are and remembering this really old song, how I learned that that was me connecting the first time to ancestors was I told my mom about it, who is really still very much into Baptist church. And when I told her about this song, she was like, "You know, that was your mama Nita favorite song." And I was like, "Really?" Um, and I had been thinking about my mama Nita, who's my great grandmother, just on my own for some time. Like for whatever reason, I just kept thinking about her, who she had died when I was 20 years old, just as I was like coming into accepting my queer identity. And I was very much like, she would not be about that. And I even, a part of my other stuff was thinking she probably even died during the same time that I was coming out because maybe she could not. That was just my own rationale. And so when she started coming up in my life, all these years later, I started to like want to explore and think like, well, maybe she's really proud of how I'm living my life. Like maybe she's trying to send me this kind of message. So this is just what I'm thinking because I'm trying to reconcile like, my past hurts. Um, and in my thinking this, I happened to connect with a friend of me and Asia's my wife, um, who does like energy readings. And I was never into anything like this, like ever. And I happened to sit with her and we were talking, and she tells me, she's like, I'm getting message from somebody named, somebody named Juan Ida, Juan Ida, do you know a Juan Ida? And I'm like, this can't be. My great grandmother's name is Juanita Hill. I hadn't even told Asia, like we don't talk about her as Juanita. Nobody calls her Juanita. We call her Mama Nita. And so when this person who doesn't know much about me, doesn't know anything about my life, tells me that she's getting the sense that someone named Juanita is like present with you, I knew then that the stuff that people had been talking about like ancestor stuff was real because I had not believed in any of that. So when I got that kind of confirmation, like really direct and clear, I just straight up started talking to her. I just like really in my meditation practice, I uh well actually Asia, my wife had already started doing like ancestor altars and I didn't know what that was about. But it was something that was like, oh, I noticed that she was doing it. And so now that I'm communicating with my own great grandmother, I was like, well, maybe I should have an altar. So I just got a picture of her and just put a picture like near my on my Buddhist altar, like on a separate kind of ledge, and would just sit and like sometimes and sing. And then I realized like, oh, I get the feeling that she likes when I'm singing. And then I later had a African divination that affirmed that and said, like, this person doesn't know what I'm doing, doesn't know what I'm practicing, and he's like looking at bones and stones as he calls them, and it's like, oh, your ancestors say they see what you're doing, they like that, keep doing that, and I'm like, wow, like it's for real. So that is I'm kind of I think similar to what I've heard a lot of you use are like very intellectual with some things where I have to have proof that this is for real. And so I think that the connections with being open to ways of different ways of connecting to spirit and getting confirmation that like, oh, so this is for real. So my mom Anita really is here, and the ancestors are really happy that I'm connecting with them. So that's how I started, and what has like led me to deepening the practice. Oh yeah. And I think should we? Is it? Do we still? I don't. Oh, we said more time.
Yeah, we were gonna go till
Okay.
12:45.
Okay.
Yeah. I wanted to share
Mm.
that um, when you've talked about um, this church being able to hold all of the multis that you are, um, and this movement, that it. I guess I want to be honest that I feel that as a call to me of like, okay, like I feel sort of like, okay, we need to grow,
Mm.
um, to because I hear that and I want to be able to hold all that. Um, so I think this is just like a comment, a reaction of that's that it's inspiring, and hearing you say that is a call
Mm.
to me, and I hope other people hear it that I imagine other people hear it that way. And this um, I didn't even know that all of that is what
Mm.
we're here to do, and I don't know exactly how to do all that, but okay,
I will say if I can respond to your comment, I think I think you for personal like what I know of you, you're already doing it. Like I don't think that there is anything more that you need to do. And so far in my experience, I feel that everyone just being open has been a response to my call for like being, as I feel like I'm called to be. I feel like this community has like supported and made space. I mean, I say this often to Dick Bailey, like as my like partner and worship associate, like the way he supports, like when I have taken like spent time in the chancel, his support has been reflective of the larger community support. And when afterwards people come and they like shake my hand and they tell me that what you said today and when you said this, how it made them feel, I feel like that is support. Like just like giving the space, actually listening and taking in and considering and allowing allowing me to sometimes like talk about me wrestling with the Bible. Like that was the first thing that I preached, and I was so grateful that this community held me as I talk about. I just got this new idea that like is being spoken through the Bible. This is what I think. What do y'all think? Like really? And the way that I was held in that and people gave feedback, like I appreciate that. And so I say all that to say I think everyone is doing what they need to do, to be their expansive and open and welcoming selves. I don't think you have to do anything more.
Thanks. I have another question too. So you're talking about spiritual practice, and I'm taking a religious education class with Reverend Sherry right now at Starkey.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about, are there UU spiritual practices? People of other faiths might call on their faith in a time of crisis, and there'd be something from their religion, that they would say, I'm dying, I'm going to do this thing that I learned. Do we have that here? And so when you're talking about spiritual practice, it just I long for not just my own spiritual practice, but a UU spiritual practice. So I'm curious how UU supports your spiritual practice, or if you have a vision of how could be supportive, how this community that we are supports the individual spiritualities that we have.
I would say for me, the principles, the 7 principles, like provide a really solid framework for me. And because they're so like broad, they really feel like really thick, strong pillars in my practice. Um, and what that looks like in real time for me, some of you all might know that I'm working as a chaplain at a hospital on the Air Force base that I used to serve in right now, doing my CPE. And in this program, the CPE program, we have to do reflections, like theological reflections. And at first I was like, I don't know how to do that. Like, what is UU's theology? Um, and what I did was look at the principles um, and like draw keywords out. And when I'm sitting with someone, um, I might notice that perhaps this person is struggling with acceptance or like um, affirming their whole selves, or someone might be suffering from injustice. Like I feel like a lot of things just relate to our principles, and so I use the framework of Unitarian Universalism to guide the way that I hold space for other people, because that's what I'm like. That's how I'm living right now, and I feel like these pillars are strong enough to like give room to help be with people. So it might not necessarily guide my personal spiritual practice, but it is how I walk in the world. Like it gives me tools for actually walking in the world, which now in the way that I like to live, that is a continuation of spiritual practice,
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a fascination with the Bible and always have.
Mm.
I grew up UU, so it wasn't a book that was.
You grew up what?
UU. I grew up in a Unitarian church, so it wasn't always something that was encouraged. There were Bibles in our house, but they were like family Bibles with names in them.
Mm.
I got to study religion in college, and I got to read the non-canonical Gospels, which seemed to encompass a little bit more than just the canonical ones. I was wondering if you had any practice that involves the non-canonical Gospels and reading those, or if it's just the Bible as we usually get it from a portion.
What was your college
That is a really deep question, it feels like, because I'm thinking of all of the sources, like the Bible, the texts that I use that more, actually, I think they're more like books that, what is it called? Like do an exegesis of Bible. So I feel like I use a lot of commentaries that draw from different pieces of different forms of the Bible. Um, so I wouldn't be able to tell you off the top of my head if they are from the non, and I've actually never even heard that word before. Non-canonical. You know what? I actually do remember. I did a talk from the Gospel of Mary, I think, recently, and that was a gift to me from somebody else. So I didn't intentionally go and like dig for it to like research it, but someone else like mentioned it, and then when I read it in the Gospel of Thomas, so I'm coming across them, I feel like, as guided, but I don't have an intentional like practice of like reading them and searching them, seeking them out and like reading them. But at some point, I would be interested in maybe working with you to do something like that.
I like the Gospel of Mary. The Gospel of James is also really nice.
Yeah, I would like to do that. I noticed that the time.
We're getting close to the end. Are you good to wrap up?
Yes. One more.
Can you talk a little bit more about how you found this church to be your spiritual home? Because it's pretty new. So just how you got to be involved and maybe some of the things that you did.
I would say the most simply diving right in. I because I had an experience where I didn't initially feel welcomed. What I did was I joined the welcome um, committee. I can't remember what the hospitality team, um, and I wrote a lot about what I wanted my church to be, and then like took it upon myself to be that and try to bring those qualities with me and find opportunities to participate in the church in those ways, so that then there would be no way that I could say that this church is not doing what I want it to do, because I am doing the thing that I want my church to do on behalf of my church. Yeah. So I don't, that's, I guess, an invitation to, to join and maybe dive into a team, that might be something that you want to like bring to the church.
Sounds like a good note to wrap up on. I just want to say that I just have this one word in my mind and this feeling of just like power radiating from this person to my right. Power in all of the best, most loving, kind, generative ways. It's really an honor to have you come and speak to us and inspire us. And I feel like um, you kind of bring together so many different threads that, that we all touch. And isn't this in some way kind of an ultimate way of being, is just being who we are and not trying to define ourselves in a limited way. So it's just been absolutely wonderful to hear from you. We have next month Beth Smyrna, I think it's how you pronounce it. Smyrna, thank you. Will be our faith sharer here, and I hope that everybody can join for that. Many thanks to Ian.
Yeah. Thank you all.